and I'm sure plenty of you will enjoy that. So we're recording, and I'll just quickly share some slides here for you. Let me just grab them. Okay, so first of all, to show you the team today, we continue to get a good sampling of all drives, which is what you want in a good dynamic team environment. I was doing a workshop for an association, one of these poor groups that's been really hit hard by COVID, and events have just been smashed, but they went ahead with a virtual deployment of a national conference, which is really interesting. I was one of their speakers, and we were looking at the variety of IDs in the group, and they were saying, what makes a great team? And I said, what makes a great team is diversity. And anytime you've got a lot of color of different drives in a team, so long as you've then got the understanding of how to harness that diversity, you can have a phenomenal experience. But you've got to, at the first instance, have the color. So it always makes for a great, a great dynamic, discussion dynamic when we've got variety of mindset, which we have here in the group, if everyone contributes. So please feel free to, share your questions or thoughts. Might be what someone else is thinking as well and would love to benefit from. So whether it's in the chat or whether it's live on audio, please feel free to contribute. Okay, the other check-in that we always do with every workshop and coaching session and so on is just to take a stock of where you're at on what we call our peak performance indicator. So on this scale of, on a scale of 0 to 10, 10 being really in stride, and on that green arrow there where you're really in the zone and firing, and a 1 or 2 out of 10 being you pulled right out to the stride, right out to the side, I should say, and out of stride, and not at your best. What's your number? And are you becoming increasingly aware of what you need to do to get your number to a really good place? I'm sure, like Grant, you were just talking about experiences with your family, situations like that can even put you in stride where you just feel, you've got great things going on in your life. But it's, instead of those things happening reactively, when you know what you need to be in stride and you can be proactive about it, that's really cool. So just as we get started for today, or for those of you elsewhere in the world, as you might be ending your day, it's good to just think, well, where am I on that scale? And am I there by accident, or am I there with intention? So has anyone got something they would like to share, either whether it's now or whether it's an experience they've had in the last week since our last webinar, around where you've been on this scale and what you've maybe done that's caused you to be either in or out of stride?
Okay, I can't wait any longer then. I gave you a chance. Paul, I just wanted to make a point about the difference. I've noticed we're in a situation, I mentioned this last week, situation I might be in, I might give that a 4, but I'm looking at what I'm dealing with it, and I have resources at hand. I know it's a matter of just nothing's wrong, something has to be done, get back into it, get some help. Like I am actually feeling like a 7 or an 8 because I'm in action on it. But if someone looked at me and goes, geez, how could you be an 8 in that situation?
Yeah.
And I just don't know if everyone's got a distinction. You don't have to be the situation. And if you could say, where's my 8 in this horrible 5?
Yeah.
You might find yourself back in the, what do I do when I don't know what to do situation. I just want to mention that.
That's a great point. I remember going through, a couple of years ago, both my mum and my dad passed away. And I dreaded that day for most of my adult life when that would happen, and yet around that time I remember feeling, when we were doing our team check-ins and we do this, the PPI check-in, and they'd say, what's your score? And I remember going, well, I'm an 8 or a 9, and like I felt awesome in terms of being in stride. I was really sad about my parents and so on. But there was such a positive family dynamic going on at the time, and I guess I sort of was a part of helping make that happen. It was really quite eye-opening, exactly what you're just saying, Greg, about how you can have a really sad situation, or what we might think of as negative energy, and yet it doesn't mean that that's in itself got to pull you out of stride. And I think a lot of people use that as a bit of an excuse, not so much the death in the family, but they could have something going on. Well, I've just been laid off, so that's why I'm out of stride. But it's actually possible to confront any situation in a way that, even if you're laid off or you're going through, any sort of challenge, how do you do that so you're tackling it at your very best, whatever that is for you at the time? And that's about being in stride. Great point. Okay, anyone else with anything they want to share?
Me. So, I don't want to make this a long story, but my son had an unfortunate incident that happened when he was in high school, which really changed his trajectory in terms of where he was going to college and his plan like that. And he's an 8-4-7-2, so his plan's very important and status is very important. And it was a crash and burn situation. It was pretty bad. And he just recently, and at the time, as a mom, I really felt for him, but I was like so excited that he was having a failure early that he could learn from. And I'm not kidding you. Like, I was like, this is great, because he's been like super type A, super perfect his whole life, and something's going to happen to knock him off his game. And at least he's here where we can take care of him and that kind of thing. And so, but he, being a 7 incomplete and a 2 in improvise, I mean, the whole ID, he was sort of down this track of, I've ruined my life forever, and this is a real big problem, and blah, 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 blah. And he just recently not only made the dean's list, but transferred to a much more, a better college and got better financial aid. And he didn't give up and just kept working really hard and trying new things. And I feel like patience as a 2 incomplete is not my strong suit. And I just waited for it to work. And somebody told me once that with that ID, it's like you're on, not just you're on a train track, but it's like an auger going one direction, and you have to completely stop and turn it around and have it go the other direction. It doesn't just go back and forth. And I feel like his auger is turning the other direction, and everything's lighter. And I love having the framework of the ID to see that through.
Beautiful, beautiful. Good on you, Elena.
Yeah, I'm so excited. And I'm getting a puppy.
Well done. Now the truth comes out. No, that's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
Unfortunately, I just had a client ping me, and so I may have to drop off. So
Okay.
I'll listen to the recording, but thanks for letting me play.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Thanks for being here.
Yeah.
So guys, let's kick on. I do, just before we get into the session with Annabelle, I do just want to cover one thing with you. I asked Ian just to pull together the attendance of a lot of these webinars. And I just wanted to show you this and really just say thank you to those of you who have been on these calls for quite, like, basically more than half the calls is the group on the page here. And it just shows the commitment that you have, not only to ID, but just to being your very best self, you know, to squeezing out of whatever conversation occurs on these webinars, you know, an insight or a strategy that might help you stay more in stride, and not just for your own life, but for the shadow you cast for everybody else. So, you know, kudos to all of you here for just the regular attendance and contribution that you make, not just to ID and to our team here, but, you know, to the world by being in stride. So I just want to acknowledge this level of attendance. I think it's phenomenal. Some of you, like Richard and Greg, have been on almost every call, and, you know, all the way down through to Mark here. This is more than basically half the webinars that are being held. So it's just fantastic. So I just want to acknowledge that and say thank you. Pretty awesome. All right, and with that, I want to move on and introduce you to our guest today, Annabelle. So Annabelle's on the call. You can probably see her here on video. And I'll just show this screen for a little bit, because I've got a couple of slides I want to show around Annabelle. If you want to see everyone on the screen, just expand your video screen. But Annabelle's there on the call. And Annabelle, welcome. You join us all the way from the UK today, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. And Annabelle's dad is also on the call. I'm not sure if there's other family members, but Graham, I've heard of you for years from Don, but never had the pleasure of meeting you. So welcome as well. Oh, you're on mute, I think.
Thank you, Paul. Is that better?
Yep, can hear you now.
Yeah, thanks, Paul, and nice to meet you.
Thank you. Thank you. So Annabelle, you know, when I've said to people, you know, feel free to volunteer if you'd like some coaching, Annabelle was very quick to reach out and say, Paul, I'd really appreciate some guidance with my ID. And I'll let you introduce yourself a little bit, Annabelle, so people can hear it in your words. But I've heard of the Kerr family. Don McDonald, just said, you know, and I can't really start this without paying tribute to just an incredible person. Don McDonald is one of our consultants who has been part of my team from the very beginning, like the day one of Link Up and ID, of course. And I just can't believe that in all that time, I don't think Don and I know Don and I have never had a single cross word. There's been nothing but support and affection and, cohesion all the way through. And Don has single-handedly penetrated a lot of the New Zealand market and is just a, wonderful person. He's been a lot of fun and insight to our broader team. And through his work, Graham and the Kerr family were introduced to ID, and quite a few years ago. I'm guessing, Graham, it's got to be 15 or more years ago since you
Yeah,
did
it was
your
probably
ID.
early 90s, Paul. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. So it's been a long time. So Annabelle, having been introduced to ID by her mum and dad years ago through their family business over there, said, well, I wouldn't mind some coaching. And my understanding, and I purposely asked Annabelle not to give me too much background because I'd rather have it all live on the call and be more authentic from my side as well. But I know I was working in healthcare over there in the UK. So Annabelle, why don't you maybe share a little bit about, what you're looking for from this call? And as well as that, just even some of your background. I'm curious to know, what did it mean for you learning about your ID from such an early age? I think we heard Grant talking about that before for his son, but you've now got the 15 years sort of down the track, because I think it is 15 years since you did your ID. Really curious to hear about that as well. And welcome.
Thank you, Paul. It's great to be here, and it's lovely to meet everyone. So basically, as Paul said, we as a family did our ID a long time ago. I think I was about 14 years old, and there's mum and dad, and then I've got an older brother and a younger sister. So it's always been a shared language that we've had in our family for a very long time. And we've got 3 improvisers, which I think Paul will talk about a little bit more and put up a slide later. 3 improvisers and an authenticator completer and a verifier completer. Is that right? Yeah, so Paul's just sharing that now. And it was, I think when I was younger at the time, it was quite interesting, I think, just to know the links between myself and dad being improvisers, and understanding that a little bit. But as I grew older, I think it helped me to understand that the way I go about things isn't necessarily as chaotic as it seemed to a lot of people, because I think I come up with a lot of ideas, and there's a lot of enthusiasm, and then if that I guess if any negativity sort of seeps in, then that I guess the enthusiasm tapers off a little bit. And I think I found it quite difficult, particularly when I thought about studying the long-term game, and I guess moving through schooling and university, which was fine in the end. And now I am in healthcare. I'm a genetic counsellor, so I work with people in the public health system who are at risk of genetic conditions. So I meet with people on a weekly basis, and talk about their family history, and have about 45 minutes with them where I am ascertaining what is possibly going on in their family, but also very much talking about the psychosocial implications of genetic testing and what that could mean for them in the future, as well as their family. And so I guess part of this discussion with Paul in the live coaching is to firstly reflect on how helpful it's been throughout my life, and how I guess my perception of my ID has changed, and how it's shaped me to understand, I guess, the way I go about things, and how, and also I guess how to pick myself up when I'm out of stride as well. I feel like personally I've been out of stride for quite a while, and I think that comes from, I guess with my career, I really enjoy the patient interaction. That's something I really thrive on. But then as soon as that ends, there comes a lot of, I guess, processes and protocols, which are all very important, of course. But I guess it's the enthusiasm and trying to, I guess, trying to find ways to keep myself not motivated, because I'll always complete my work, as we all do when we have responsibilities, but I guess how I can bring myself back into stride in the career I'm in now, or does it need to be that I need to think about other alternatives? And so that's what I really like to get out of today, I guess, Paul, and I guess just further understand my idea a little bit more, and then reflect on how it's been in the past.
Great. Thanks, Annabelle. Good intro. And Firstly, kudos to what you're doing over there in the UK. I mean, we look at it from Australia, and both, I know the UK, but the US have been hit really hard with COVID, and I guess it would be a really challenging environment. No matter what we hear, I know it's never the same as being there. Yeah, I can appreciate how challenging it must be, even though, as I say, it's very different over here. So can I ask you, first of all, how do you describe yourself? When you think of it through the lens of ID, knowing what you know about ID with whatever knowledge, whether that's a lot of knowledge or limited, and with having had the experience, if you had to sum yourself up to somebody else, how would you sum yourself up?
I would say very much yes person, enthusiastic, flexible, and I guess just really willing to please at the end of the day, people, and getting the team, wanting to get the team over the line, really having a view. My lens is very much for the team, what we're doing, how we're going to get there. So that's how I would, I think, view myself.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think that's a really good understanding. I mean, it's very aligned with what I would say is true of your ID. For those who are, still new to ID and getting a sense of how all the drives work together, I know that was one of the asks of these webinars. When you look at Annabelle's combination of instincts, that really strong drive in the improvised drive, that's the one that thrives on the interaction of not just people, but positive people, and being able to help and inspire and, shift people to new possibilities for their lives. So talking about their dreams, their hopes, or if they're in a difficult situation, helping them see that there is hope, that they can get back to where they are. All of that, bringing that positive message is a big part of it. But when you've got the first three drives all going down, that says, with the verified drive, I don't want to get into all the detail. The avoid complete drive is, I want to make it really quick. So it's like, short and sharp. And then the avoid authenticate is all about connecting with the humanness of people. I heard someone give me this example, Makis on our team the other day was explaining to me about, he heard this podcast on truth. And I thought this was a really great example, that truth to an authenticator is about the facts and the reality of what you see. It's visual, it's physical, you can see it. And then there's the truth of the human experience. And I think that truth is definitely the world of the avoid authenticate. So connecting with humans about the depth of their experience, but doing it quick and keeping it really positive is what this idea is all about, Annabelle. So I'd say in terms of, and by the way, doing something that's really different, like genetic, being in the field of genetics and where that could go. It's not just your role and the impact you make for people, but where that whole field of endeavor could go. It's like a Pandora's box of opportunity. That really would appeal to you. But in any role, this is an ID that wants to be at the front end, being the catalyst and kickstarting things into play. But the minute you've got to stay with something and follow the rules or do all the paperwork and the administration side, that's what really is probably more the first three drives. And that's always going to be a challenge. So typically someone with this ID finds themselves being drawn to a team, and a good team brings a couple of things to you. One is it's more people to interact and play with, and have fun with. So that's good if they're the right people. And the second is there's generally people very unlike you who can then complement you and do a lot of the things that aren't necessarily your passion. So I don't say that it's necessarily a team player. I think because of the intensity of your drives, whilst this is the irony, so many people, and there are other people on this call today that might have a similar style of ID. And although on the one hand, this is the irony of it, although we're drawn to people because we want to have fun with others and we want them to complement what we're about, because you're so intense with your ID, like you've got a really strong 8 and improvised, and then you've got these other 3 drives that all go the other way. It's what we would call a fairly intense ID. And therefore blending with people who you can just, who get you and you get them, and it just is a really nice dynamic. That is not automatic. That is something that will take typically a fair bit of experimentation, and a few different goes to get it right, as it were, So it can leave you at a point where you're on a team, it doesn't work, and you think, oh, so maybe I'm not a team player, but you actually are. But it's not automatic. There's certain dynamics you need to have in place. Does that resonate with you?
Yeah, absolutely, definitely. And I think when you're talking about possibilities, that is something in my career that I get really excited about, is where is this going? What can it, and thinking about that definitely excites me and sparks some enthusiasm. And absolutely, working from home has been lovely, but at the same time, it's been, I mean, I got quite low at one point because I wasn't interacting with people on a daily basis, particularly my team. And even though there's been some benefits of not being in, because sometimes being in a team can also be a negative experience if people, I guess, with dynamics in a certain team. So I think that's been a positive, but also at the same time, not having, I guess, as you say, those people to talk to, have fun with. And also, as you say, have the people who are different IDs to bounce things off, to really, I guess, help them, I guess, ask for their help and their opinions and that sort of thing as well. That's been a real loss, I think, with working from home at the moment. So
yeah, it's so true. There's a lot of people that, and particularly younger people who maybe we've thought of as being more resilient, but when there's this, now that COVID's going on longer than what people I think originally expected, the younger people who are particularly wired like you, who are working from home and who would thrive on that interaction, but particularly when they're living on their own, it is throwing up a real challenge to them, you know, and depending on their level of self-awareness, number one, and the support network around them, number two, you know, it can be throwing them really out of stride right now. So this type of insight is incredibly valuable. Okay, so if I just come back to some sort of basics for you to give you this awareness for how to approach career. The first thing, we always start with your strongest drive. So I'm sharing it like this with you so that others on the call who might be different ideas, but thinking similarly about, you know, lining up their own career to be more fulfilling or be more effective. We always start our coaching by looking at your strongest drive first. And it's not always the drive that goes up. It is, in your case, you can see this big 8 and improvise here is like it's 3 points from the middle, whereas the complete and verified drives are only 2 points down. So whilst they're strong drives, they're not as intense as the improvised drive. So most of the insight or focus from my coaching would come through the improvised drive, and then I'd look at all of them together. So always start with the strongest drive. And this is the drive that I would just say to you as a bottom line, if you're not coming from a place of passion, you're not coming, you know? So finding a career or an interest that fascinates you, that excites you, that you've got real passion around, that's the key, first and foremost, for anyone driven with the improvised drive. And that doesn't mean, like I think of someone like Gail on the call who's a 9 in improvise and she's in tax. And to a lot of people, they think tax or accounting is really boring. And yet to someone like Gail, she found a way of finding a real passion in that particular area. I know other people who might be, for example, as school teachers, they'd say, but isn't that the same thing over and over again? But there can be for certain people, and it's just because of how they view the world and view, you know, it might be their upbringing, it doesn't really matter where it comes from, but they've arrived at a place where they've got a real passion about something that to anyone else or many other people could be quite boring. Doesn't matter. Is it passionate for you? And even if it's not an area of passion, I would say to you as an improviser, you can still approach something with passion. Like if I'm out washing the car, I can still do it with passion. If I'm washing up the dishes, I can do it with passion. You know, the dishes hate it, but I mean, I do really well when it's like that. So if you can approach anything in life, your fitness, anything, and come from a place of excitement and passion, that's always the first step, kickstarting that improviser into play, you know. Then separate to passion is the positivity. You need the environment to be positive. And that could be, and that isn't always about people encouraging you or being, you know, optimistic and so on around you. That can be the clothes you're wearing, how your desk is set up, whether it's clean, tidy, whether it's facing a window, whether you're inside, outside, just all, it's different for different people, this concept of positive energy. But I would say to you, think about the things that give you positive energy, the music you listen to, the way you drive to work, the car you drive, all of those things. But also, really importantly, what are the things that bring negativity? And that is a separate list. And there might be wonderful things on the positive list, but they could be overtaken by the things on the negative list. And I would really identify both what they are and, very importantly, who they are, you know, Because it could be that there are, you know, one or two people that, like a flatmate, for example, and I know people who it's their home, and home normally is meant to be a place that warms your heart. And I know people that say, when I think about going home, and it's my home, but I'm walking on eggshells and I hate it, and the energy is not good for me, and yet you spend a lot of time at home. And so then you've got to think, well, how do I address that? Do I move, or is there a conversation I can have, or something I can change to shift the energy, so that ultimately you want to get to a place where, particularly with how strong that improvised drive is, on the negative side, there's no negativity. There's nothing on that list. And what you've got is positive. And that is, you know, that is possible. That's the first thing I'd say to you, is to know that that's possible is a good place to start from. So there's a couple of little exercises you can do, first of all, just to make sure that that improviser, big part of your makeup, is really kept in check and nourished, you know, each and every day. I might just stop there in case you've got any questions, or if anyone else has anything I'd like to share. What about you first, Annabelle? Anything you know that you're thinking as I talk to you about this?
Yeah, I think, yeah, the negativity side of it, I think, is very important to me, and they're very diminishing very quickly in an environment. Greg's just put a comment about aligning my drives. Sorry, would it be helpful to have all your drives find ways to align the boring work with the human benefit and joy you bring to them? And absolutely, that is exactly what I try to do, is that I try to think about that conversation I've had with them and then bring that to the then several steps that we need to do. And I guess, yeah, I think it is mainly around there's the negativity that comes with it, and that may be in the team, it may be with the work. I think I find it the possibilities side of it quite difficult, because it is very, I don't know how to explain it, but the change in the role I'm in, or implementing change, or even I guess encourage for change to happen, doesn't happen often, and so it's not very much view. I guess it just seems very stagnant, and I guess at the end of the day, I don't know. It's hard to know whether I need to get out or I need to like what I can change and what's in my power to change about that, and I guess that's where I'm a bit stuck, and where I feel like I'm quite out of stride, and then it ends up I just get quite stressed and had a lot of anxiety about it, and about my job and how I'm going and what I'm doing, and yeah, I just feel quite lost, really.
Okay. Okay. So it's important. There are words you're using there that are really significant for your drive. When I think about what's on the negativity side, you know, the word stagnant is so not who you are. You know, when you think about your ID that likes to be dynamic and positive and moving forward and thriving on new possibilities, if there's that word or feeling inside you that you're stagnant, and the other word you said was stuck, you know, this ID doesn't want to feel stagnant or stuck. So unsticking yourself and getting to a different place in terms of, you know, this feeling of stagnation, that right there is, you know, a key piece. So the question is, can you do anything about those where you are? Is it, yeah, is it a conversation, or is the dynamic one that you can shift, or do you look at it and sort of go, when it comes to the possibility and hope of being able to change that, is that possible in the current area that you work in, or do you need to move?
Yeah, and I guess that's a very hard question that I need to think about and I need to really consider. And I guess that's the positive. That's one of the really helpful things about the knowing your instinctive drive, is that I guess it validates the reasons why you are feeling the way you are, I guess, at the end of the day. But it's not me. I guess I need to make some changes, don't I? And ask myself the hard questions of, okay, can I change this negativity that's happening? Or is it going to be something that is it a whole environment that needs to change? So, yeah, I don't have the answer though.
Well, let's open it up to the group, because I can see some chat discussion going on here that I think is really, really valuable. And it's not just true for you, it's true for anyone who's an improviser who's in a place of negativity and stagnation, including where it's a relationship. And a lot of them sort of, there's incredible resilience for an improviser, because it's like, well, I'll just keep coming up with new ideas on how I can deal with this. I'll try this, I'll try this, I'll try this. And whenever you've got hope, you can keep going with something. But there comes a point where you get confused between, am I living on hope, and or am I just looking at this through rose-colored glasses, and am I actually bashing my head against a brick wall, you know, and it's never going to change, and what's really needed is change. So it'd be interesting to just hear from some others who maybe have experienced the same situation. And it's easy to say to you, yep, change, you know, change the relationship, change the role. But I always go back to when it's our children, you know, and I know you don't yet have children, but if there's a kid that's really frustrating you, you don't just say, well, I'm going to change the child, like I'll flick that one and go and buy myself a new one. We've got to find a way to rearrange the deck chairs, you know, within the same relationship. So I think it's good to sort of really deeply explore, and sometimes the input of other people. And your ID, that avoid verify drive, is your way of solving problems is to reach out to people. And the improvised drive is the one that loves brainstorming and productive discussions. So your ID is a very natural collaboration ID. Like when you said before, well, I just need to think about some of these things, I'd say you need to collaborate about some of these things. And so, because what happens, we heard this on the call last week, which you heard as well with Judy, when she said, when someone else just understands me, that changes the whole dynamic. And once she feels someone gets her as an avoid verify, that sense of empathy, it almost opens her own mind up to new ways of exploring solutions, even if she doesn't have the solution from other people. There's a certain weight and almost a paralysis that comes when you just feel burdened down with a problem, but don't have the sense of empathy from others. So empathy is a great pressure or mind release ingredient. So I would just open this up to the group and say, you know, are there people who have got a strong improvised drive, for example, or know of people who've done this, and when they're in places of real stagnation and you feel stuck, what have you done to change that without necessarily having to change the role or get out of the relationship, that have opened up a whole new perspective for you that might be insightful for Annabelle?
Gail here, noting that my directions are all the same as Annabelle's, just a little bit stronger. And my daughter is just like your father. She's a 5537, not a 5538. I often just go and talk to somebody. When I'm in that, when I describe my feet are stuck in the mud, and the mud is like I'm in a quicksand and it's pulling me back down, I just go and talk to somebody. I don't even necessarily listen to what they say, but for me, thinking it through gives me the answer. Occasionally, I don't get the answer real quick. So occasionally I have to ask 10 people, but normally just talking to somebody. And as I say, and I don't necessarily get the answer. My partner, who's here with me, is a 7762. And I ask him something and he gives me the answer in the first 10 seconds. And he's still talking and giving me more problems with the risk and this and that. It's absolutely fascinating. But just hearing you, I so know what you're saying, because it's happened to me all my life, absolutely all my life. And, you know, and people say, why are you asking me? Oh, thank you, I've got the answer now, and wander off. And so sometimes it's just about talking to someone, you know your own answers.
That is fantastic, Gail. I love the simplicity of that. Thank you. And Susan, I just saw your comment in the chat, which I also think is another angle that's really interesting. Can you just expand on that for Annabelle's benefit as well, please?
Yes. So what I found is I can be eternally positive and inspiring and all those sorts of things, but sometimes I'm kind of ignoring the fact that I actually do know the answer. And it's about having the courage to state it to someone with that sense of knowing that I know is right, and to actually know that I can create something and put it to them and just see what happens, and then bite your tongue.
That is brilliant.
Does that make sense?
That is so cool. That is so cool, because that your ID is a real non-confrontational ID. You know, it wants it because it wants this positive energy. It wants to avoid the things that either are or could become negative, including the decision, you know. And I think the point that Susan's making is so powerful, because deep in your bones, you may well know the answer, but, you know, putting it out there is risky, and risky in terms of the confrontation or some of the negative things that could happen. And yet, on the other hand, you look at your ID and it loves the fact that it would be unknown and unpredictable. It's like throwing something up in the air, and wherever it lands, it's going to land. The one thing for sure is with your ID, you'll absolutely deal with it, you know. So I think that's a great insight, Susan. Thanks for sharing that.
Oh, could I just jump in quickly? Annabelle, I have a client that with your ID exactly, and he calls me from time to time regularly through the year. I'll get 4 or 5 calls a year. He lives up in Brisbane. And he calls to say, tell me I'm wonderful. Or he says, tell me why I shouldn't quit everything right now. Or he calls for a plug-in, and we just start talking. And whatever is going on now, I just listen to him for a little while. But he basically comes in for a battery charge, and because I'm not going to call him all the time. I don't know he needs anything. So if you can find someone that goes, tell me I'm gorgeous and helpful and smart and wonderful, it's the right person.
He's on the call. His name's Graham Kerr.
Yeah, but have the courage to do that, because you know what you need better than anyone.
Yeah.
And Greg, if I can just come in here, Paul talked about Don McDonald, and that's a relationship I had with Don, is that we'd have an issue. So I'd ring Don up and get that enthusiasm, and we'd break things down, and away we'd go. So absolutely. But can I say, with an improviser, you know, you have your goal, but you're very, very open-ended as to how you're going to get that goal. And where, say for example, an authenticator might be very step driven. I got to do this, I got to do that, got to do that. So what I've found, and I just posted that that message up there to you, that on an answer to you, Greg, is that when it gets so insurmountable, is that I try and break things down to even smaller little tasks or goals. So I'm still getting the I'm getting the sense of achievement that we're moving towards things when things are relatively stagnant or not moving. But I'll go and find something that's small, a smaller thing to do. And then if we get to the end of the day and you go, well, I've done something towards where I'm trying to go. We all want it to be in actually huge steps, because that's how an improviser works. We want to go and smash it over tomorrow and whatever it is, but it just doesn't work like that. So you get it in peaks and troughs, but you just got to try and make sure at the end of the day you have that sense of actually move forward slightly, and then with the techniques you've done it with, which is collaboration, as Gail said, you know, go and chat to somebody and get the enthusiasm from there. It's just got to work through the techniques on how you do it.
Excellent. Thanks, Graham. I'll come back to you later, because I think a lot of us might be dying to hear from the dad, you know, and what it was like raising someone who's a strong improviser as well. I think a lot of people have probably got kids in a similar position, and it could be very helpful to just have a few insights from you as well. Annabelle, I want to come back to you, and given the comment that Susan made about often we actually know the answer, but we don't want to actually deal with it. Do you, when you sort of go to your sense of knowing, do you know what you need to do?
Yeah. All of those comments and feedback were just so great that I actually got quite emotional when I ended what I was saying, and then we started talking about it a bit more, because it does feel quite negative to talk about it. And that's, I guess, what I fear is the confrontation and the possible negativity that might come from it.
Yeah. But
I think it comes down to, I do really know the answer and what I need to do. But it's really the fear of confrontation and the fear of negativity and letting people down that I struggle with.
Okay. Well, thank you for being so honest and vulnerable and authentic. But you're surrounded by a group of people here that if you need support each week as you go through, you know, dealing with what you know you need to do, there's wonderful support right here. But I can see from your family, and even you, Dad, being on the call today, and you've already mentioned to me about the relationship you have with your family and your parents. I think one of the real upsides for you is you're surrounded by fantastic support, you know. So what's your knowing? What do you know you need to do?
I think I need to, I guess move, really don't want to leave what I'm doing with regards to genetics. I think it's fantastic, but I think just moving out of the area that I'm in eventually, whenever that will be. Because it comes down to my need for possibilities and positivity, and I've obviously worked with some fantastic people and have a great team, but it's working toward the goal of being in a team that is, I can't really describe it, it's goal orientated and very much it's about aspiring, you know, it's about moving forward, which I feel like I do. I really enjoy my job, and I really see a lot of benefit in it for patients, which is fantastic. And I really enjoy delivering that care. But I guess it comes down to where else, you know, if I'm not in stride, then, you know, is there somewhere else that I could be of more use to these patients in a different way that is also aligned to my ID? So, yeah. But I feel like there's a bit of confrontation to go through before that happens.
You made an interesting comment before about the fear, you know, although you know what to do, it's more the confrontation that it involves. And I think that's a great insight for a lot of us hearing this, you know, particularly where we're trying to help people solve problems. It's not, we don't actually need to help solve a problem. You know what you need to do. It's more just having some support to go through the process. When you said before about the fear of letting people down, who's in your mind there?
Oh, just people I've committed to with regards to my role and visa, everything like that, because I'm over here. And I feel like I've there's been a lot of commitment to this particular role with regards to education and obviously support from mum and dad. And so, there's a lot, I feel, not pressure to stay in, of course. Mum and dad have always been fantastically supported, but I think it may feel like there's a sense of failure there that you know, I guess that's not something I necessarily want to keep going to do for the rest of my life as well. I've got a master's degree in genetic counselling, so it's the qualification I have, so it's very specific. So I guess there's an element of that as well.
Okay. There's some interesting comments in the chat section here that, you know, I'd say to you, you may well, the ultimate position is when all the ingredients line up, you know, where you're doing something that is not only where what you're putting out is really stimulating for you, but the environment you're in is also stimulating back to you. But until such time as you're able to change that, and you'll know when that's the right conversation to have. But, you know, some of the comments here about focusing on what you can do that's unique yourself, and you know, I'd say even more than unique is game changing. You know, how do you show up? But you just showing up really positively, even though some of the people you're working with, for as wonderful as they are and their intentions are, if some of the environment is stagnant, just you showing up the way you are and being in stride, you're probably making more of a difference than you realize. You know, you may be the reason they're still going, because the energy you bring, whilst it's all very well to say you've got an intense ID, and that can be both a positive and a negative. The positive of that is you bring a level of energy in a really subtle and almost implicit way, excuse me, that could be incredible oxygen for everyone around you. And you may not be aware of the shadow you're casting and the difference it's already making. And just even knowing that can be way more uplifting than if you just sort of focused on the task or the role that you're doing. But I would expect that if we were to pulse all the people working with you, they're drawing a ton from you without you maybe even realizing.
Yeah.
Just in light of the time here, Graham, I'd love to bring you into the conversation and just ask us that. Firstly, is there anything you want to say as you hear all this from your daughter? I don't want to rob you of the opportunity to say anything you would want to say. And then secondly, just to hear, you know, for those other parents out there raising improviser children, what has been most on your mind as you learn about Annabelle's ID? What have you really kept in mind to help her become who she is today? You're on mute, Graham.
Here we go. Sorry. The big thing, Paul, is because we were using ID in our business I'm a chartered accountant and had a chartered accountancy business. So through Don, we used ID in building a lot of teams for helping people, grow their business and that. So I saw the value of it, and hence we did our family very early on. And what was quite fascinating, and I was sitting here reflecting on it as you're working through the session, as the kids were starting to make their choices in life, moving to through to high school and then university and whatever they did, we would come back to the IDs and what they were and where they sat, and so enabled to try and ensure that their goals that they were trying to achieve would line up with what their ID was. So we'd have the discussion around the dinner table on what the IDs were, and therefore they got an understanding of where things were and a self-realization of what their probably not so much strengths and weaknesses, but what their needs were. And I think so far the three of them have made some really, really good choices in their career paths, and also their choices on some of the things that they've got involved with and how they've gone about the things. So I think that was really powerful. And also my wife Kim and I understanding where the kids are. So for example, the younger one, the other sister, she's had her life turned around with COVID because she's been doing her master's in Melbourne. She came here prior to the lockdown that we had in New Zealand, and she's just not been able to go back. And so what her plans were for next year to finish her degree, which she could still do, but, get a job in Melbourne, that's just an absolute tatters. And so we've been watching her in the last month start to make choices on how she's going to rebuild her life and her, her sense of purpose or needing purpose, which, again, comes down very much to that 8 improvise and how she's made her choices. And so, that having the ID and her understanding what she is has enabled her to work her way through things. And now she's starting to build a plan, and a different kid from a week ago because she started to get purpose back into her life. So it's been wonderful from that perspective, and then them having an appreciation of, I guess, who they are from an instinctive perspective to be able to make some choices. And I wouldn't necessarily say all the choices are always perfect or correct, but there's some reasoning and behind on when they go to make those choices.
Right. No, that's so true. And just the fact you've had the insight, you're then able to make the allowance for them all to be different, because you've certainly, whilst you've got 2 kids similar to you, you've got a son who's really different, and then you've got Saint Kim. It'd be interesting to hear from Kim and how she's coped with all of you guys. Your wife, she must be running around like crazy just trying to keep all of you people together and in some level of harmony when everyone's sort of so different here. It's fun family.
Well, actually, that's the one we have to be accountable, because it's her drives. And Kim needs it right. Well, let's all sit down and get the plan out and get a bit more detailed to it, because we're all off on camp, having a lot of fun talking about it. So Kim is the cornerstone of actually keeping us all very grounded, and we're Jonathan, which is our son. And being that authenticator, completer, he has to scope what he's going to do out. He has to think it through, and he has to go and do it himself. And, you know, it doesn't matter how much I talk, look, just go and do this, or this is how you should do it. He actually has to go and research it and make the moves at his own pace. And it just, I watch it and I go, my God, that idea is just so true. It's unbelievable. So, you know, yeah, fantastic, really. It's been a great journey, really.
It's been awesome that you've had this insight for so much of the, you know, the growing up of the kids, and now in their adult life, being able to, as they have challenges like what Annabelle is presenting to you as a dad, especially being able to sort of know where she's coming from, and, you know, just to be able to guide her and understand it. That when not only is that good for you, but provides the empathy to her that, as you can see with Annabelle's ideas at 3 and Verify, is so important to feel that someone gets her. So to have that most in the family. I mean, I quickly talked about this with Annabelle a couple of days ago, and she was like, well, mum is definitely the cornerstone. You know, she runs around pulling us all together one way or another to make sure we're in harmony. But again, for Kim to have that sort of insight on the family, that must be an enormous stress reduction for her. Because imagine if she didn't have this insight. I mean, he thinks she's got a bunch of crazies.
Yeah, probably has, but yeah.
Yeah, but you got a good excuse.
Yeah.
That's really good. So can I just provide room if there's anyone else with comments or observations or even questions for Annabelle or Graham, particularly in terms of how you've used this in the family, please feel free to ask. Just be aware.
Paul, I have a question. I've got a question.
Okay. Right.
So I've got a question for Annabelle. Annabelle, what does a dream team look like to you? What are the ingredients to that?
Yeah, I just see your comments, so thank you for that. So dream team would definitely be another, I guess, as another improviser, so I can feed off that positivity. But I really do value I guess it would be the authentic, like, problem solving element, and I guess the passion for problem solving, because I like the passion bit of it, and then you've got the person who actually wants to solve the problem. And so being able to go to them and, you know, and see that they're passionate about solving the problem, I'm going to inject them with some enthusiasm too, and then we're going to go off and, you know, and we're going to collaborate about that, but knowing they need time as well. And then obviously, yeah, I mean, ideally, all of the sort of drives combined, but and it may be because my brother's an authenticator, so I understand how he works. My partner hasn't done his yet, and I know we're not supposed to speculate, but I'm pretty sure he's an authenticator. So I really enjoy that passion that comes from them researching and needing to get it right. So I think that would be an ideal team. But just, I really think positivity and that moving forward and having that collective goal is, it's really about the team work for me. I don't really mind what the goal is. I'm not really fussed about that, but as long as we can see what that is and we're working toward that, people who would, I guess, collaborate on that in various ways. But I don't know if that answers your question or not, but.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing you say is that the problem solving, that moving forward, to Paul's point, the forward motion of solving a problem, going after it, people getting in there and being more passionate about the problem solving and getting in the work. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So, and I'm also curious, what's been the benefits of being in the environment that you've been in? What would you say are the benefits of it?
I'm definitely more, I've had to just really teach myself to be more strict. I've learned a lot of skills now in just how to get things done, and doing it in a way that does inspire me to do it. When, you know, when I've got you know, and everyone's like this, everyone will be trying to do different things, but whether that's things like listening to music and setting myself goals. So I'm going to do these 40, sort out these 40 patients in 2 hours, you know, or like setting myself like time goals and that sort of thing as well. And then I guess really just figuring out when my enthusiasm, not enthusiasm, but drive tapers off. So it's pretty soon after I see a patient. So I really need to get everything I need to get done for that patient, which is possible, straight after I see them. So everything's fresh, everything's there. Unfortunately, in the role that I'm in, you can't get everything done straight after a patient. There'll be things that come up 4 weeks later, 6 months later. And as long as it's new and it's moving forward for that patient, I'm back. There's enthusiasm. But if it's still the same sort of thing and we're in a stagnant place with that, I guess the work that I'm doing, that's when I struggle. So I really realize when I need to get the things, I guess the time frame, which is beneficial for me. And then I guess the other thing is just really finding those problem solvers in my team as well, and knowing that they are the ones that want to hear about that and are willing to help as well. So yeah, I guess those are a few things that I've learned, but I also, yeah, definitely just had to put my head down and really do things that I'm not necessarily driven to do. I don't think anyone wants to do things like administration, but yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Pam. Thanks, Annabelle. Annabelle, we're coming to the end of the time that we've got available. Can I just ask you to maybe share, how are you, how are you now in terms of, have you got any insights, or as a result of the sharing that's gone on today, both from you and towards you, how has this left you now?
Yeah, I think there's certainly some water to go under the bridge, and there's timing around that, I think. But I guess it's a classic improviser. It's so nice to hear that other people, the comments that people are writing, and people's feedback and people nodding, we can see you on camera and that sort of thing. Like, that is what I thrive off, and what it feels really positive. And I guess at the end of the day, it's just really identifying that need to move forward, and that need for positivity and possibilities, I guess.
Yeah.
And I think there are ways I can apply that to the role I'm in at the moment. And I think Greg just popped a comment in there to say, can you call the patient after you see them and plug in for the paperwork? Absolutely, that's a good way to, that's not a bad comment at all. Might be a good way to just check in with them, make sure everything's fine, and then, but it gives me that next level of enthusiasm to continue on with the work that I need to do. So yeah, I think it's been really great. I mean, I think there will be a shift that will need to happen at some point. And Pam's just said, what's the impact you're making? And yeah, I feel like there is a great impact for a lot of families. And I really enjoy that it is family orientated as well, my role, talking about genetics. So we talk about a lot of people and the impact for them as well. And it's just keeping that goal in mind and keeping that focus, as that's what I'm doing, and not letting the negative side of it, I guess, take over that too much.
Right. Well, good for you. I just want to sort of bring this to a conclusion by saying, first of all, to you, thanks for being brave enough to put yourself out there and volunteer to just get, to know that it would help you to get some insight and collaboration was just smart on your part in the first instance. And then to do that in a really open, authentic way has been really great to see. It's very refreshing, but it's uplifting and inspiring. And I think all of us on the call really appreciate, more about who you are. Please keep us informed as the next few weeks unfold. I know I and everybody else here would love to know. So what happens next? What are you doing next? Because it won't take you long. It's not like this is going to be 6 months away. It's probably days away before something shifts and pivots for you. But you also come from an awesome family, and clearly that family support around you. I know a bunch of people on the call. I'm looking at different faces now, thinking I know their families, and they've got. Anytime you've got good family support around you, that's really solid and reassuring, and it just particularly different for different IDs, but for an improviser to have that positive energy so close to home like that is just really wonderful, and you've had it for a long time. So between, you know, your family and your ID family, there's a lot of good positive energy around you and being sent your way, and I'm sure it will all help you, you know, make some great strides over the next few weeks. But don't ever lose sight of, just by being in stride, just the difference you're making each and every day to other people anyway, just by being the light that you are, you know. So yeah, keep us posted. Guys, I know we're out of time. Thanks so much for being on the call, and to you and Graham, and I think Kim was on there silently as well. Graham, I saw her name there before. But to all of you guys, thanks for being such long-term users of ID, and then for bringing some of the experience to light for everyone's benefit today. And hopefully we'll see you all on the call again next week.
Thank you, Paul, and lovely, really nice to meet you.
Thanks, Graham. Take care, everybody. Have fun.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye-bye.